Okay. Good morning. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy spring. As Eileen just said, the prelude today is Lord of the Dance, and I think it'll be one we want to stand up and sing along. I danced in the morning when the world was begun. I danced in the moon and the stars and the sun. Came down from heaven and I danced on the earth. At Bethlehem I had my birth. Dance then, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. Dance for the scribe and the Pharisee, but they would not dance and they wouldn't follow me. I danced for the fishermen, for James and John. They came with me and the dance went on. Dance and wherever you may be, I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. I danced on the Sabbath and I cured the lame. The holy people said it was a shame. They whipped and they stripped and they hung me high. Left me there on the cross to die. Dance and wherever you may be, I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. Dance on a Friday when the sky turned black. It's hard to dance with the devil on your back. They buried my body and they thought I'd gone. But I am the dance and I still go on. Dance and wherever you may be, I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. They cut me down and I left up high. I am the life that'll never, never die. I'll live in you if you live in me. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. Dance, stand wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. Lead you all in the dance, said he.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome everybody to Taos United Community Church. We are happy you're here. Happy Easter. We're happy everybody's here. Oh, Valerie's here. That's good. And Sally and Barbara and Scott and Virginia and Hayes. And we are lucky to have Jamarah, who's going to be preaching for us today. So, yes, she is zooming in from LA. And we have a couple of new people in our midst today. Betty and David Foster join us. So we welcome you to Taos United Community Church, where we believe you belong here, no matter what you believe, what you used to believe, what you're never going to believe again. This house of prayer belongs to you, and we're really happy you're with us. And we have refreshments, that's not easy to say, next door after church, and please stay a little while so we can get to know you better. Thanks. Okay, a couple of announcements. The first one, I want to remind everybody Rinda went to great lengths to make a directory for us. And so if you haven't told her yet whether your listing in the directory is correct, please do.
Oh, I never checked.
Okay. And Steve has an announcement.
Thank you. Hello to friends on Zoom, Jamarah from LA and the whole crew that's watching there. Yes. Welcome to everybody here. I just want to say next Sunday I've been asked to bring a message here. So I invite you to come and bring friends. I'm going to be doing a biblical drama in character and in costume. So I invite you to come. And sunrise was great this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And Valerie, can we see your face, please? Maybe you're not close enough to hear. Well, even if you're not, Sid has an announcement. Please turn your video on, Val.
Poor Valerie. Hi, everybody. This is just the last announcement for this year's medical debt relief. All the thank you notes have gone out to all of us and all of the community donors, contributors, donors, thank you, the donators. And I'll put this letter in the back. It tells you who the community churches were and the individuals. And we always usually get thank you notes from the community, the people whose debts have been forgiven. And one of these was, I am blessed to be a member of this community with such a caring heart. So true. But I want to give a thank you and a shout out to Valerie, who we cannot see. But yay! She is the lead on this and does so much behind the scenes in terms of meeting with the hospital and making sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and that everything is correct. And she is also the constant in this. You know, there's been a lot of staff changes at the hospital, but for the last 3 years, Valerie has led this, and really appreciate all that she has done. And also a shout out to Virginia, who has written 2 articles for the paper the last 2 years, which has really helped in getting donors. And Hayes and Virginia have written all the thank you notes the last couple of years for the us in the church. So thanks to everyone. We'll get started on it earlier next year, I'm sure.
Thank you, Sid. Any other announcements? Okay, so I'm going to ask you to take a comfortable seat, close your eyes, even those of you at home, just take a couple of deep breaths, breathe in the magic of this day, and breathe out the new beginning that we all get every Easter, every day, every time the sun comes up. Today we pray to feel connected to ourselves and to each other in these extraordinary times. May we find the courage to live as Jesus taught us, with compassion and open hearts, even when, especially when, we are hurting and lost and confused. May the blessings of Easter shine on us all today and every day. And at Taos UCC, we have a tradition of coming up and lighting candles. We just usually light one each. I guess you could light more if you want. And while we do that, we're going to sing a song in our book, number 35, Were You There? So what we do is take a candle, light it, choose one of the sand bowls, and as you light the candle and you place the candle, think of something that's on your heart today, a happy thing on your heart or a difficult thing on your heart. Thanks. Yeah.
And you might notice that the third verse might seem unfamiliar. That was added by our dear Reverend Pam Shepherd to this version. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified the Lord? Were you there when they crucified the Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified the Were you there when they crucified the earth? Were you there when they crucified the earth? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified the earth? Were you there when Mary knelt to weep? Were you there when Mary knelt to weep? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when Mary knelt to weep? Were you there?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'll be reading from E.B. White's introduction to his wife Catherine's book. And the book is Onward and Upward in the Garden. Armed with a diagram and a clipboard, Catherine would get into a shabby old Brooks raincoat, much too long for her, put on a little round wool hat, pull on a pair of overshoes, and proceed to the director's chair, a folding canvas thing that had been placed for her at the edge of the plot. There she would sit, hour after hour, in the wind and the weather, while Henry Allen produced dozens of brown paper packages of new bulbs and a basket full of old ones, ready for the intricate interment. As the years went by and age overtook her, there was something comical, yet touching, in her bedraggled appearance on this awesome occasion. The small, hunched-over figure, her studied absorption in the implausible notion that there would be yet another spring, oblivious to the ending of her own days, which she knew perfectly well was near at hand, sitting there with her detailed chart under those dark skies in the dying October, calmly plotting the resurrection.
I love that story. That's a beautiful story. This reading is from Matthew 26, 69 to 75. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a certain girl came to him.
Okay. Well, you tell me when you're ready. I'll move over.
Probably, she said. But he denied it before them all. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath. "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent go away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And Peter went outside and wept bitterly.
Thanks, Eleanor and Ken. Happy Easter. I miss you. I miss you guys so much. I'm going to be honest. I had such a hard time writing this sermon, and not just because I'm stuck on Zoom and can't give all of you a hug. Normally the energy of this day should be Happy Easter. And Easter is certainly a miracle and a day for celebration, and I promise we'll get to that. And we've got plenty of weeks liturgically to get to that also. But I want to ask you to bear with me a little bit for how I'm looking at Easter this year. This year, I'm really focused on Easter as the culmination of an entire week. And it's an awful, awful week. There's a logic to its progression. And part of the difficulty of this week is that there are actually 2 logics. There's our logic, there's our human logic, and then there's Jesus's logic. And for this past week especially, those 2 are really in conflict, and it's heartbreaking, especially because it's a week of such personal closeness among this whole group of people. So I want to explore the tension of that week on 3 levels. It's personal, it's political, and of course it's spiritual. So let's start a week ago on Palm Sunday. That's a day that makes all the sense in the world for the disciples and so many other people from Galilee to Jerusalem. They've been on this journey with Jesus for 3 years, and they're finally arriving at what feels like a logical destination. They have put all of their trust in them. They have upended their lives individually, and gladly so. They've left their families, they've left their hometowns, they left their jobs. These are not people who have money to start with. They have given all that they have in that moment for 3 years for some point, and they think they understand what that point's going to be. And their friendship with him has been leading up to this moment. And their sense of trust and understanding of that plan coming to fruition as they're walking into Jerusalem must have been so reassuring. They had made the right choice. They had picked the right side for themselves and for their family and for their community. And that's where the personal turns political, and also where things start to get a little bit uncertain. So remember, these are almost exclusively poor people. They are uniformly powerless. They are doubly marginalized within Israel and within the Roman Empire. They're making an annual pilgrimage to a place where they and their families every year have to enter from a position without any privilege or without any power. And for the first time, they're getting to walk in from a position of strength. They have this army of peace and of love, and it's going to work. It has to work. They're walking in as part of the kingdom of God. And that has to mean that the social balance is going to shift, right? They're finally going to get to come in from the margins. They know it's still not safe yet, but they know their movement has strength and momentum. They're marching across the Pettus Bridge in Selma, I think. And this has to be what God has promised. Jesus walks in with humility, but also authority. And the next day he's in the temple, cleansing the waywardness that so many religions, maybe all of them over time, and other power structures will face. It feels right and it feels safe and it feels inevitable. But Jesus isn't following the script. He's saying and doing all sorts of things that honestly don't make a ton of sense. He's saying he'll be gone soon, and then he's letting a woman anoint his body for death when that expensive perfume could have gone to fund movement work. And I know as organizers, we've all been there. Things are starting to get really confusing by the middle of the week, but it still has to be going somewhere, right? We have to be changing things here finally. And then we get to Thursday and they have a meal. I want to pause here in the story of that week and ask us to do something really, really, really difficult. And please feel free to, if it's not healing or supportive. I want each of us to take a minute and just remember a meal with somebody that we've lost. Maybe one of the last meals with them, or maybe just one of the best. I can completely remember the taste of my grandmother's mashed potatoes and the taste of the 7-Up in her fancy cups, or Martinelli's on Thanksgiving. I remember all these little habits that we do on special nights or on regular nights. We put the 7-Up cans back in the fridge with little margarine tops so we wouldn't lose the fizz. And I remember she'd make a strawberry milk right before bed. And I remember the exact order in which she'd eat and the things that she would say. And it was wonderful. But now looking back, I also feel like the most important thing about those memories is that I have them, I remember them. And it was like a gift she gave me to hold on to, whether or not that was her intention. So just take a second and remember a meal with someone you loved and how much it means to you right now. So whatever you're remembering right now, the fact is that it's something that that person gave you to hold on to months or years or decades later. And if there'd been any intention behind it, it might have sounded something like this. This meal, this table, this time is precious, and we won't have it forever because life is short. So please, please, please remember this moment. You might just need it one day. And so now you guys know how I think about communion. The Last Supper is intimate and it's beautiful. And it's also the beginning of a terrible cascade. We've all been to Sunday school and you know the story. It's the beginning of their goodbyes, whether they know it, whether they accept it or not. And there's so much humanity in this part of Holy Week, in this part of the Gospels. And I feel like those human parts are written for us. We have things that feel very recognizable to at least me, from Gethsemane to Jesus's trial and afterwards. And by recognizable, I mean panic and anger and confusion and clinging to rituals, because sometimes that's what we have, and it's all we have with death. We see one disciple violently trying to protect Jesus in the garden from being arrested. We actually see a lot of Judas's thought process after his betrayal and can feel his horror and realizing that he can't undo that thing that he did. We see Peter's absolute terror and claustrophobia as he's running for his life, because for all he knows that he is running for his life, and it turns out over the next few years they all are. And we see his shame at running. We see Joseph of Arimathea, and then later the women needing to practice these rituals of someone passing, because that's the only script that we have still sometimes. And then really distantly, we see Mary, but we don't get a sense of her interior life in that moment. But her pain speaks louder than almost anything else. A mother losing a child, witnessing the killing of her child, didn't hurt, I'm sure, any less 2,000 years ago than it does today. And I want to take a minute there and just have all of us remember, and I know none of us are forgetting it, that tens of thousands of mothers in Gaza, which is just 40 miles away from Jerusalem, have lost their children and been lost alongside their children since October. And also that Rachel is weeping for her children in Israel at the same time. And while we're on politics, because I can't not do this, we also get the story about Pontius Pilate that feels at its best convenient for what becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire. He somehow becomes the good guy kind of in the story, or at least the most ethical with the benefit of hindsight. He says, how can those people be so bloodthirsty and vengeful and tribal? And how familiar is that for those of us who live comfortably in privilege and we watch all of this on the news or read about it happening on that continent over there? We can understand how those people would be so hateful to each other, whether it's in Africa or in Eastern Europe or in Haiti. How could they do this? How can they not be more evolved? And that privilege is all of us. We get to live here in America. We are the most privileged people in the history of humanity. Whether we like it or not, whether we fight against it or not, that's still ours. So let's just take a moment to keep an eye on that judgmental privilege when it maybe sneaks out at us, because the privilege that we have, that empire, those systems, usually created those conflicts in the first place, and we don't get to wash our hands of that history. So we have all these very recognizable human instincts of fear and self-preservation and loss and confusion around the abrupt ending of a week that started out very differently. It started out with hope and with certainty. We knew what was going to happen on Palm Sunday. They were so sure. And I want to affirm that those instincts are more than just familiar, right? I see myself in that, but they're also logical. The logical thing to feel on Friday and Saturday and very early Sunday of that week is honestly exactly how they're feeling and how they're acting. They should be angry. They should be afraid. They should know that their lives are in danger. They should feel guilty. They should have no idea what's happening next, but it's not good. And so it's the logic of what should be expected. I remember almost 2 decades ago now, right after I graduated college, my first job was working at the ACLU. And one night I had to wait up all night at the office to put out a statement about an execution that was certainly going to happen. There's always that hope, right? That just at 11:59 something else might happen. And I waited and I waited, and midnight came, and there was no call from the governor, and the execution happened and the man died. And that's all that happened. And executive director came over and she hugged me and we cried, and that was it. The thing that we expected to happen happened. And I felt hollow and I felt angry and I felt a terrible sense of shame at living in a country where state-sponsored murder is allowed and practiced often in 2024. Back to our story, though, about state-sponsored murder, which is the starting point of our religion, and somehow we can't move past it. None of the people in the story have any logical reason to think that Sunday morning won't feel just like the terror of the past few days, no matter what Jesus said about rising on the third day. You know, he liked his crazy metaphors. And just like E.B. White thought it was absurd for Catherine to be planting tulip bulbs that she, in fact, did not live to see the next spring. It's just wild. And honestly, it feels right now like we're in a moment in history where it is really, really hard to find any logical reason for anything except for panic and despair and anger. We are backsliding with our eyes wide open into the darkest parts of this American experiment. We let thousands of people die on the streets every night from homelessness and hunger. Economic inequality and lack of healthcare access is rampant. And there are more Brett Kavanaughs and Clarence Thomases than Elena Kagans and Sonia Sotomayors in our courts and among our neighbors sometimes. Children are starving in Gaza and buildings are crumbling in the Ukraine, and refugees are dying before and after they make it over the border. And half the world seems to be meeting all of this with indifference, if not outright smugness. And we are scared and we are angry and we are running out of logical reasons for hope. And yet, beloved, and yet, on Sunday morning, today, the stone gets rolled away and we somehow make it to Easter. We don't expect it and we sure don't deserve it. But we make it here and this miracle happens, and it shouldn't happen. There's no reason logically this should happen. And yet it turns out that Easter is the beginning of this entirely different path. And it's amazing, and it's not something we even understand on Easter, right? The disciples on Easter are confused. It takes them several days to start believing any of this. Poor Thomas is going to be confused for a minute. And I understand that, because how could this happen? How are you going to ask me to completely shift my definition of what the kingdom of God and a kingdom of love can look like? But it happens, and we're here, and we spent 2,000 years building this beautiful, complicated, and sometimes very troubling, but beautiful faith that is built on that miracle and everything that happens going forward. So today I'm celebrating the absurdity of Easter. It's just absolutely absurd. I'm celebrating how illogical our faith is. I'm celebrating a meal 2,000 years ago where someone said, remember this because you're really going to need it someday. And today's that day. Every day's that day. Today we celebrate the people who have hope that they shouldn't have any reason to have. We celebrate how Brother Louis lived through so much history and was still wild enough to be the most hopeful person that I knew. We'll celebrate the resurrection that Catherine White was plotting in her garden. Celebrate that even through this awful week with all of his pain and all of his disappointment and all of his goodbyes, Jesus had a different logic than everyone else. He could see around a corner that we couldn't see. And that when he comes back, he doesn't just say, I'm here. He doesn't just say, I barely made it by the skin of my teeth. He says, there's good news. There's great news. And I'm so happy to share it with you with love. Let's celebrate this Easter with humility at our own very limited understanding. And let's have compassion for ourselves with our human instincts. And let's thank God for this world and this universe and this kingdom that doesn't operate on our logic at all. And amen that it does not. I find such peace and a peace that passeth my understanding. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't have to. Because we do have the certainty that God is love and that his love is creative and unexpected, and we can't wrap our minds around it if we tried. And in the meantime, we have this Sunday morning and we have each other. And on our good days, we're just crazy enough to think that it might all just work out all right. So happy Easter. And I love each and every one of you for being exactly as crazy as we are.